Good day, good day. What's going on, y'all? It's Sae'Von, aka the Vegan Heathen. I hope y'all are blessed. I hope y'all are balanced. Today, we're talking about automation. Now, what is automation, right? Well, according to iZotope, the company behind the famed mastering suite Ozone, automation is having your DAW automatically make certain changes for you over time, right? Whether that be a change to a fader, a knob, or a switch, or any number of things, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. But effectively, another way that I would like to convey it is that automation is what allows you to truly have your cake and eat it too, right? It allows you to make fewer compromises in your mix, production, and arrangement process. So, give you a concrete example. A lot of songs, especially in the hip-hop trap genre, you'll have an 808 and a kick. Now, I know before somebody puts in the comments, I know that 808 is kick, but y'all get what I'm saying. So, typically, there would have to be a decision to be made of which one of those is really going to carry the low end, that body of the track. Is it going to be the 808 or the kick? But let's just say that in that particular song, you actually have it where there are segments where it goes away entirely and it's just the kick, which is something that is pretty common in the song. Well, if you had a static mix and a static EQ, static simply meaning a mix that has no automation within it, you may have already made a decision to scoop, let's say, 60 or 80 hertz and down out of your kick because you wanted to allow room for the 808. But when you get to that segment of the song where it's just the kick, you could use all of that low end if you felt like it, but not if you had a static mix and you already took it out. So in automation, you can have an EQ automatically open back up that low end to allow that extra information to shine through, and then you could automatically have it scoop back out during the, let's say, verses where you have the 808 and the kick back together once more. So, cake, and you get to eat it. All right, so that's just a quick little example that should convey it. I'll give you one more. Remember back in the day when 40 was producing all those songs for Drake, right? Back then, there was something very common that people started referring to as the underwater effect, where the song would start out and all of the high end would kind of be muffled, and what was often being done actually was that there was an EQ over the entire master bus or the stereo bus. And what was going on is that it started out scooping out a lot of that high end, right, with a high cut. And then gradually over time, so let's say over 4 bars or 8 bars, it was automatically opening up slowly but surely, and it was creating this psychoacoustic effect of something coming out of water because all we had was the low end, and so it sounded muffled, and then as it opened up, it felt like we had it all of a sudden. And that was achieved most likely using automation. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of what automation is in practice. So, why should you automate in your songs aside from the examples I just gave? Well, one of the biggest ones is that it's going to save you time. I know in my journey, in my path, sorry y'all, my fault. I have my homeboy coming up, my barber, as y'all can see, we got this quarantine hairline kind of going on, but I got shave. So anyway, one of the things it's going to allow you to do is save time. Back in the day, I spent many hours fighting my own mix because I didn't know how to really strike that fine balance. So that example I just gave you of the 808 and the kick is an example. But with automation, you can know for a fact that, okay, I need the vocal during the verse to be -7 dB. But in the hook, I need to bump it up to -6.3 or maybe -6 dB, making it a little bit louder, and then bringing it back down, right? So that way you don't have to try to fight to find what's the perfect level for the entire mix, because oftentimes there's no perfect setting, whether it's EQ, compression, gating, or volume for the entire mix, and that's where automation can really save you some time. Now, the other reason you might want to use it is so that you can really accentuate certain moments within your song. So something that I like to do is in moments of transitions or effect, or where I might be building tension in my track, I may have let's say a riser, right? I might have it swell in volume by like 7 or 9 dB right before it ends and fades out into the next part of the song, but I'm having that transition happen over a half a second or a quarter of a second. Literally, so it's super quick, super brief, but it allows just enough of that action and push to really accentuate that particular moment within the track. All right. Now, another reason that you would want to use automation, I'd say probably the main one, is so you can breathe life into your mixes, right? Now, don't get me wrong, a static mix can be a good mix, but in reality, most of these mixes that you hear on radio or on Spotify or wherever you might hear it, these mixes and songs that you think sound amazing, I damn near bet my house that it's using some automation, right? And the reason is because you can have things happen in a much more dynamic fashion, and it's gonna really bring life into your mix. I mean, I'll tell y'all this, and a lot of y'all probably are already aware, but a lot of songs, they're literally automating the BPM, the volume, all of this on the entire master bus, right? Because if you bump the BPM of a song up by, let's say, 2 or 3 BPM, it's gonna make it feel faster, because it is, which is gonna make it feel like there's more energy there. So let's say that in the intro, the verses, the song is 120 BPM, but then during the hook, they will often automate that so that it's 121, 122, maybe even 123 BPM. There's no particular number, but my point is, it is different in different parts of the song, but it's subtle enough that you feel it, but not so drastic that it is jarring at all. Another thing often is the volume, as I've said. So especially in EDM songs, when the hook or the drop comes in, they may raise that joint by 1.5, 2, maybe even 3 dB, okay? Because they know that this is the part of the song that needs the most energy, the most bounce, the loudest part of the song, so they bump it up. And then they bring it back down during the verses to create that contrast so that those hooks feel bigger. So what we're gonna do is go ahead, hop inside of Ableton, and I'm gonna pull up a track of mine called Fluke, and I'm gonna show y'all how I leveraged automation in this particular track to get some particular effects. The main things that you'll notice particularly are how I use automation to accentuate the width of the entire song based on the stereo positioning of various elements in the song, as well as some volume automation and some things that I do on the master track as a whole. So if you're ready, go ahead, follow me back to Ableton, and we're gonna jump into it. Let's get it. So we have Fluke open here in an Ableton session, and the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you actually have your automation lanes showing. So if you click the A key or you press this button up here in the corner, it's going to bring up the automation lane. So this is them hidden, this is them showing. So anytime there's activity in an automation lane, you will see a solid line. And if there's no automation, it'll be a dotted line. Now, do keep in mind that sometimes a lane can show that it has automations just because there's a dot on it. So anytime a breakpoint is inserted, and anytime you're automating, a breakpoint will be created, sometimes multiple in most cases. But if there's a single breakpoint, it'll show that there's automation even if nothing is actually changing. So see how this line is completely flat the whole way through? This says 0 dB and this side says 0 dB. That's a representation that there's actually nothing happening, but this breakpoint is in place in case you wanted to try to move this around. But there's actually no automation happening. So just something to keep in mind. Now, in terms of actually performing your automation, the first thing that you're going to want to do is decide what it is you want to automate. The easiest way to find that out, or to figure out what can be automated, is to right-click on whatever the parameter is. Now, let's find a track. So, for instance, this piano right here, right? So on this track, we have a couple different things being automated. We have the gain and we have the balance, so the left, right of the stereo field. And when you actually hit this drop down, by default it may say none. What you want to do is find where the dot is, and the dot is going to tell you what actually has some automation lane activity at present. And then what it'll do is bring up the plugin that has automation, and then underneath it, that second tab is going to show you what function of the plugin is being automated. So we have balance and we have gain, but as you see the rest of this list, we have the device on, so that's this button right here. And notice when I cut it off, it drops down, and when I cut it on, it moves up. So that's another way of kind of figuring out what can actually be automated and what has automation at present. We have left phase, invert, right phase. All of these could be automated. And so let's pull back up the balance. Now, when you're deciding that, okay, you for sure, you know you want to automate the balance, for instance, right? So the left-right location of the sound source. Now, typically speaking, when something is in the middle of its ultimate value, so see how this says center, it's going to be at the middle. The automation lane will be dead center. And typically when something is disabled or the function is off, then you will see it at the bottom. So if we were to cut this utility device off, so remember it says utility and it's off, you see how it's at the bottom, we click it on, it goes to the top. That's basically how they're almost all going to work if it's a binary feature, a on or off, a bypass, unbypassed. Now, there's three ways you can get this in here, this automation activity. One way would be to use a MIDI device, and if you're going to do that, you're going to want to make sure that you have this automation arm button triggered, because otherwise it will change the value. So you could twist a knob and it might change if it's on the right or if it's further to the left, but it's not actually going to record that in real time, so it won't be automated. It'll be a static change. Now, I don't have that set up, so that's not going to be what we really go too deep into. But the other ways you could do it would be to add in breakpoints by clicking and then dragging along the area that you want to change, knowing that left to right is the change over time, and then up and down is going to be the amount, the proportion of that change. So that's one way to go about it. But do keep in mind too, one of those things that can kind of be tricky when you're first playing around with automation is that the breakpoints are really pivot points. They're the kind of axes. They're anchor points. And so if I were to put a pivot point on the right and on the left, and I'm trying to change what's in the middle, it's actually going to change everything behind that pivot point if there's not an anchor further to the side. So I'll show you what I mean. If I put an anchor here now and I move this, nothing behind this point is going to move. But if I don't have that, it will move it with it as well, and that may not be what you want. So that's one way to work around it. My favorite way, to be more precise, is to actually just highlight the area that you're looking to change, because then it's automatically going to add in that additional breakpoint. So see how there's these extra breakpoints that got added. So there's no breakpoint here, but as soon as we move this, it creates it automatically to make sure that only the highlighted region is what's changing. That's my favorite way to do it. Aside from that, you can actually hit the B key and you can draw your automation in. And so when you draw, it's automatically going to kind of do a similar thing, and only what is drawn in is going to be what changes. And know that the resolution of that drawing, that marker, that pen tool is going to be dependent on what you have set up for your grid. So as I have it right now, the grid is off, so it's as fluid as I want it to be. But let's say that the grid was set to 2 bars. Then it's only going to be able to change something every 2 bars. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. So just keep that in mind. Now, in terms of actually getting value or use out of automations, we ain't automating for the sake of automating, right? So what we have going on right here in this track is that we have this piano part playing, and we want to move it out of the way to make space for what we want to be the focus, which is the saxophone part, courtesy of Mike Casey. He has some dope licks and lines that he made available through Splice. And so what we're actually doing is we want to move this piano where by default at the start of this verse, at the start it's in the center, but then we have some new elements come in later on, and we want to move this on out of the way to make room for it. So that right here, we want this to be the center focus at that time. And then when we get over here, and so then notice we bring it back in, and as We have another piano. This is the hook piano, and that is already to the right. So this was 21 to the right. This is 33 to the right. And when we get over here, we go from there being no, so there's no saxophone playing right here, but when it comes back in, we want that to be the focus of the show again. So we move the piano to the right using automation, and then we move the notes. We move those vocals from being in the center to the left. So we have the vocals, these vocal chops on the left, and then we have the piano moving to the right. And so by doing so, we open up the middle of the stereo field to let the sax come through. So we'll play it from here. On the left, on the right, and where that sax at, in the middle. And so that's one way that you can use automation. Now let's jump over here. And this is the single element that has the most automation happening. Now don't worry about this all being blues just because the track is frozen to keep all that locked in. As I said, I keep a lot of things in MIDI until the very end. So we have a bunch of different effects going on, and if you look down here, shortcut, once again, we look for all the orange dots. So on Serum, we have a dry wet, and we have a reverb being automated. We have a whole device being bypassed on and off. That's this one knob filter, and we have the filter being automated, and we have the Fab Filter Pro Q2 being bypassed on and off. We have gain being automated, and we have the stereo location being automated. Now, why is there all of this automation? So the reason is the desire was to create this effect that this ARP, this arpeggiator, was coming from out of nowhere, from far out of frame as we can imagine it, and then it was creeping back into focus until it became the focus, the apex, the climax of the song. And so what we wind up getting as a whole is this kind of coming out of the depths, out of the side of space and coming back into center frame. So let's just watch everything we have going on. So I'll play it for you, listen for these changes going on, and you can actually watch these knobs move and see if your ear can pick them up. Okay, so now let's solo it. So mind you, as I said, we have the reverb decreasing over time. So it seems like the sound is coming closer because there's less reverb. So there's less of that psychoacoustic distance that reverb creates. We have this filter opening up. So it's a high cut, but then it's opening itself up so that we can have more of the high-end information come in. And then ultimately we have it cut off altogether to let it all come through. And then we have this EQ kick in down the road, and all that's doing is creating space because the kick comes back in really deep, the low part of the kick. So we took out some of the low end out of the ARP because we no longer need it. So we make space for that bottom of the kick. We have the volume increase over time to make it seem like it's coming closer to us. And we have the balance. So then we have it come from the right to the center. So I'll solo it so you can hear it one more time more closely. It's the reverb decreasing. It's coming to the center. Right? That's all possible using automation. And just for fun, because it's funny, I'll show y'all what it would be like if we decided to automate the tempo, because you can automate the tempo too. So where's the drop at? And then we bring it back down to normal. So I'm kind of being silly here now. But my point was really just to demonstrate that you can automate basically any and everything. The main thing to keep in mind is just what's your intention. Why are you automating these things? Don't just do it to do it. Do it to serve a purpose, to breathe life into your mix, to add some excitement, to accentuate certain elements, to make drops more intense. So it's a lot of ways you can do it. As I like to say, it's a lot of ways you can eat chickpeas. It's a lot of ways that you can automate. So I hope this was a helpful little video for y'all. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. And if it wasn't, give us 2 thumbs down. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and ticking that notification bell to make sure that you're notified anytime we upload a new video. As I said at the start, the name of this song is Fluke, and it's available on all streaming platforms. I'm Sae'Von, the Vegan Heathen. I hope y'all stay blessed and stay well. Keep creating. I'll see y'all soon.